Hi, this is the final video blog for our leadership ethics class, and before I talk about some of the substance of our posts for this week, I just wanted to take the time to thank you for what's been a really enjoyable class for me. This is the first time I've taught this class in quite this way, and I learned a lot through the process of doing it, and I also learned a lot from the experiences and thoughtful debate that you brought each week to our discussion board. So I want to thank you for that. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned some too, and you've enjoyed the opportunity to do some introspection and to communicate with each other and have what I hope was as much of a social learning experience as you can enjoy in an online format like this. This week we have our last case, and in many ways it's the most complex case that we've dealt with. You're dealing with some very specific managerial problems, some financial constraints that you're having to deal with, and as many of you have already pointed out, personnel issues and interpersonal issues. And in a lot of the cases, as I've already gone through the process of your initial post, I think people have done a really good job as a group of identifying what the constraints are and what the core issues are that we should be considering. And so when you think about constraints, we're talking about obviously the finances create one constraint, but there are other kinds of constraints as well, including what contracts allow you to do, what legislation in different states might allow you to do, and of course policy and the contracts themselves, and not just that they're under contract, different personnel, but what those contracts state and how you can work within them. So you've done a good job of identifying those issues, and you've also identified some primary principles that you're trying to use to help guide you. And they take slightly different forms, but they've tended to focus on the best interest of the child and maintaining the optimal learning experience you can for children in that building. Others of you have also pointed out the life of the institution itself. And so you think about different types of issues that might come up if you, for example, cut custodial staff and the impact that will have on the long-term health of the institution moving forward. But there's one issue that as you've worked through it, you've gotten to the point where you're identifying what kind of cuts can you make and where will those cuts be, and as a group you've differed on exactly who gets cut or what gets cut. But with rare exception, as a group, I think only one or maybe two people has gone much further than just saying what you would cut, meaning what budget item. You would cut the secretarial line or the custodial line or administrative line. But you haven't gotten too far into thinking about who. And I'd like you to explore that a little bit as you move into the second day. So I know that there are going to be certain reduction in force dictates and contractual dictates that will shape how you cut people. Oftentimes you cut based solely on seniority, and some of that is out of your control. But think beyond what those constraints allow you to do and begin to think of how you feel the process should play out. What kinds of decisions would you make about who would be cut? For example, how would you choose if it wasn't just dictated for you, if the decision wasn't taken out of your hands? Which secretary would you cut if you were going to cut secretaries? How would you decide? Which teacher, which administrator would you cut? And if you decide that seniority makes sense for you, regardless of what is forced, again, think about what you would create in a perfect world. Well, why? Defend that. Is that the most ethical choice? Does it seem the fairest choice? Are there other reasons? I know one person brought forward the idea of keeping the most qualified staff. In other words, use this as an opportunity to take the people who are the least strong or the lowest performing members of your staff and get rid of them and keep the best people. Is that the most ethical approach? Is that the fairest? And if so, why? And if it's not, maybe the most ethical approach, but there's some other reason why it's the most important thing to do, then why should that trump the most ethical approach? And make that argument. And I think it's a good opportunity to try to put all these things out on the table and begin to argue for which priorities should bubble to the top when we're dealing with a case like this, as complex as this. And then I also want you to consider, go all the way back to when we were talking about the trolley dilemma. Think about that first day. And we had a discussion about what questions would you want answered that might impact your decision. And you brought up ideas about, we talked about age, we talked about whether they were criminals or not, we talked about whether we knew them or not. Well, now here we are, 5 weeks later, and I want you to think about that related to this case. What if you knew something about these people? Would that change how you made your decision? And if so, what would you know that would make a difference?